Hey y'all, today we're talking about lab safety, which I know is kind of a bummer because we're not actually in the lab this year, but we are going to do labs, and these are important safety tips for any scientists. They'll apply in sixth grade, in seventh grade, and eighth grade, and hopefully we'll get to see each other and actually use our lab safety. But we're also going to have you do some labs at home, so it's really super duper important that you know how to be safe no matter where you are. So today we're going to go through some slides about lab safety. All you need to do is watch, and at the very end, if you have any questions, you can ask. Okay? All right. So the number one thing we do care about is safety, because if you can't do science safely, you're kind of out of luck, right? If you can't be safe and keep yourself safe and your classmates safe, then we have a big problem, and science is really hard to do. So that's why we spend the beginning of every single year. So sixth graders, seventh graders, and eighth graders are all starting out with just talking about and reminding ourselves of safety. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. But the easiest thing to remember is that safety rules are just really common sense. If it sounds like it's the right idea, that's probably a good thing. If it sounds a little iffy, like you shouldn't do it, or you're wondering if you should do it, probably not a good idea. So if you look at this picture, there's a lot of just common sense things, right? Don't go crazy and play mad scientist like this guy up here. Follow the directions. Make sure you've got the appropriate stuff. Don't put your mouth in chemicals or like smell them like crazy. Don't do experiments on yourself, and try to be super safe by not eating or drinking and then getting rid of stuff in a proper way. But we're not going to use really many chemicals at home. A lot of the labs that we're going to do are really have some simple materials, but still we want to go over, especially if we come back to school and in your seventh and eighth grade, we want to go over some of the rules. Okay. So the very first thing is that you always want to wait for the teacher, okay? That's a really important rule, probably in any class, but especially when it comes to science class. So even if there's this nifty lab that's set up and it's bubbling and it looks super cool and there's like diamonds and shiny things around it, you want to come in and just sit down and not do anything yet, okay? That'll be pretty easy to do at home because you won't have your lab set up yet. But when we get back to school, really important to wait for the teacher and to not touch anything, and make sure that you read all the directions and listen to the teacher about the directions before you start the lab. Super duper important. Okay, another thing, and we just talked about this, but I'm just going to go over it again, is that you never touch anything until you're told to do so. So sometimes, kids walk in the room and there's this giant beaker set up, or there's some water that's boiling or something. Just for the safety of everybody, make sure that you don't touch stuff until you're told. Kind of like if you're a little kid in a candy store or a glass shop, right? To be super polite, you don't want to touch anything until you've been told, okay? All right, next up, and this is pretty common sense, is that especially when we're at school, you don't eat or drink in the lab, okay? One of the reasons for that is because you might get some of it in what you're actually doing, or it might distract you, okay? And especially you don't eat or drink whatever we make, unless there might be a couple labs where I say, go ahead and you can eat that, or you can enjoy this snack while we're doing it or something like that. But definitely a very good rule for labs is don't eat or drink anything, okay? You never know what's in it. You never know what it's been, especially now in the time of germs and being super duper careful. Don't eat or drink anything, okay? It's just a good common rule, but it should also make sense too, okay? And this is just a reminder. Also really important, not even gum. So I highly recommend that you're not even chewing on a gum or a mint when you're doing a lab, just because I've seen kids that are chomping away and they're talking or they're looking around or something, and the gum falls into their cup or into their experiment, and that can really mess with your experiment. It also is kind of distracting. So refrain from having gum, okay? All right. So we obviously can't do this. Maybe we can do this a little bit after this video, but and this is important at home too. It's really important when we get to school that you keep your lab and your work area safe and clear. So whenever you do a lab at home, it'd be a really good idea to maybe have it set up next to your computer, or maybe even a little bit away from it, just so you don't get any water or materials or supplies on your computer. Kind of the same thing when you're eating, right? If you had a giant glass of soda next to your computer, I would worry about doing that because I'd worry that it would get on my computer. So making sure that whenever you're doing a lab, you're keeping really clean and safe. So let's talk about what you need to do when you're at school. So when you're at school and in 7th and 8th grade, anytime you do a lab, you're going to have a special lab table, which is pretty awesome. You're basically going to get like a black table. I know this is a table on the side, but you're going to get a black table that usually fits 2 kids on it. That's a lab table. And that's where you're going to do all your experiments, which is awesome. Some classrooms have lab tables that are built for 4 people, which is really, really cool. Probably what you'll have in 7th or 8th grade. But it's really, really important that, number one, you keep everything extra off that lab table because we will be using chemicals and sometimes fire. Ooh, and you want to make sure that, your papers and important stuff are not near that. And then also that you're keeping stuff off the floor. A lot of people like to bring their drawstring bags and stuff like that. And it's just, you have to be really careful. Same thing if you're doing a lab in your room this year, possibly. Make sure that the floor is pretty clear so you're not tripping over anything, okay? Important. All right. Also, just like you would if you're cooking something, or just like if you were doing a craft at school, right? Super important to clean up. Sometimes this is a major bummer of a step, but it's really, really important. So make sure you clean up and put away your lab. Make sure there's not anything that's around, like liquids on the floor that somebody's going to spill or trip. Okay, this is important during COVID, and it's also really important now because you might be touching things in the lab, and then you definitely don't want to start picking your nose, or reaching for your nose, or scratching your eye, or going in your ears, or touching your face a ton. It's really, really important that anytime you're doing a lab, that if you do need to, oh, I got an itch in my eye, or I got something in my nose, or something like that, you move away from your lab, wash your hands, touch your face, then go back to your lab, and usually wash your face or wash your hands after that too. Just really, really important to keep all that stuff, right? And we've practiced that a lot with COVID and with masks and everything, so you guys should be okay. But really important that you're not having direct contact with a lot of the chemicals and stuff in the lab and then touching your eye, right? Just common sense. Okay. Also, really important during this time, but we're going to practice every time we do a lab, whether we're in school or not, will be really, really important that when you're done, you wash your hands. Okay, and here's The Rock telling you that you should probably wash your hands for a long time. This was hard for me to get used to because I had to sing the birthday song 2 times, but whatever method works for you, wash your hands with soap and water when you're done with the lab. There we go. There's the Home Alone guy. If you've never seen the Home Alone movies, I know they're kind of older. Excellent Christmas viewing watching. Okay, the other thing that we're not going to really use because you guys haven't gotten them yet, but as soon as we do get back in school, you're going to use your safety goggles. And unfortunately, I don't have any with me right now, but they're basically bigger. They kind of look like hockey, like what you would get if you were playing indoor hockey in school. Why can't I think of what that's called? Anyway, floor hockey. Okay, yeah, if you're playing floor hockey, you would get those goggles, right? That's basically what everybody gets. So when you come back to school, you get a pair of goggles when you're in 6th grade, and you keep them during 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And basically, anytime we do a lab, you put those suckers on. You have to wear them in order to be doing a lab. So unfortunately, we don't have them now. And when we do labs at home, they're not going to be so dangerous that you won't, that you will absolutely need goggles, but a lot of times, especially when you get into 7th and 8th grade, it's going to be important to put them on, and you're going to need the kind that go all the way around to the side of your face, because if you just wear glasses like this that are goggles, stuff could poke in there, right, or a liquid could get it in the side, so you want goggles that go all the way around. Do not worry about purchasing them right now. We will not need them until we come back to school, okay, so don't worry about those, but an important rule. And again, here's some other reasons why we wear goggles, right? To protect our very important eyeballs. There could be chemicals or heat or fire or sharp objects. Just really important to wear them, especially when you're in the classroom. Okay, some lab safety equipment that unfortunately we're not really going to need, but I want to show you really quick. Every science room has a fire extinguisher. Okay, that's only ever used by the teacher, but the fire extinguisher is super helpful. Like, let's say a fire broke out somewhere in the room, I could run to the fire extinguisher and then blast the fire, hopefully if it's not too big, somewhere and get it to stop. There's also what's called a fire blanket in every room, and that's if your clothes or your arm or something caught on fire. We'd take the fire blanket, we'd open it up, and like a giant bear, we'd hug you and get all the flames out. So that's a fire blanket. This stands for an eye wash station. All your science classrooms, and let me see if I can show you real quick. Let me take you around. Oh, you know what? I don't think this one has one. Oh, our science room has one. That's in a closet, I think. But all the science rooms in here, I'm walking towards one right now. All the science, you know what? I don't even think that we have one in the closet here, do we? Bummer. Okay, well, I'll have to show you. All the other science classes, we don't have one, but we can use the sink. But all the other science classes have an eye wash station, which is kind of just like, it looks like a water fountain. And if you were ever to get chemicals or anything that hurts in your eye, you just kind of splash it into your eye slowly. And then this stands for a chemical shower. We don't have those at Glencrest, but as you get older in high school or college, or maybe you work in a lab one day, they might actually have a shower inside that just has a curtain that you go in. So if you got chemicals that burned on your body, you could easily rinse your skin off. Okay, so that's some lab safety equipment we use, and I'll show you that if we come back to school. Oh, here's some more. So here we go. And I'd also show you then what to do in a fire alarm, or what to do if there is a tornado alarm. And I'd show you what we do if we break glass, because sometimes we work with glass and it breaks, and we just have to know how to get rid of it so that nobody gets hurt. Okay, and then again, this is what happens when you don't use the eye wash station. We're not going to worry about that too much at home. If you were to get anything in your eye when you're at home and you're doing a lab, you want to go to a sink right away, run some water, and then take that water and splash it into your eyes. You don't stick your eyeball right under the water because that's just too much pressure, but you would splash it into your eyes. Okay, that's just good safety, but we really shouldn't be using anything that should harm your eyes while you're at home. Okay, also important when we get to school is that there's a couple things. When we do a lab, you want to make sure you're always wearing your goggles, okay? You want to tie back any hair. So if you notice this girl right here, she has her longer hair in a ponytail, okay? That would be a good recommendation for when you're at home if you're doing a lab, and especially if you're using heat or something like that, just because sometimes your hair or what you're wearing can kind of go into your experiment, right, or dangle down, just like with jewelry. So we usually take off, if you have any long jewels or rings, you take those off and put them to the side while you're doing a lab. Then we also always want to take, if we have baggy clothes on or long sleeves, we take them and we roll them up like this guy is doing. And then for safety, we try not to wear sandals like this or our bare feet, just in case we're using anything sharp. Again, I'm not too worried about this when we're doing labs at home, but it's important to remember that you want to be safe and keep distractions and things out of the way. And that includes your clothes and your hair and your shoes too. Okay, so we don't really have to worry about this very much, but this is a good life lesson that anytime that you're going to smell something, that you use the waft method. And here's waft, W-A-F-T, waft. And waft just means that when you're smelling something, so instead of taking, this is, I'm just using this hand sanitizer, instead of smelling anything, and hopefully you don't do this already, but in science class we especially do this, but anytime you smell something, you don't go like this and sniff it into your nose or put it up really close to your nose and just take a huge whiff of it, right? What you're supposed to do instead, because it's just better for you so you don't pass out and get all these chemicals in your nose and your brain, is that you hold it a little bit away from you, and then you take your hand and you move it and brush it like that on top of it. So if this were my chemicals right here, I would take my hand and go like this and waft it. That way the smell slowly and gently comes to my nose and I'm not, going crazy with all the chemicals. So this is the way that this crazy guy here is wafting, is what you want to do. You want to hold it a little bit away from you and then pull your hand towards and kind of make it like a little breeze so you can smell the chemical that way. But that's called wafting. Oops. Yeah. Okay, and then of course, some really simple things that you want to try to do inside, and are probably rules anyway, is you want to make sure you're paying attention, you're not horsing around and doing crazy stuff with your lab, because that's when sometimes people get hurt, and that you're not running around. And this applies to home too. If you're doing anything, that you're doing a lab on, and we're with anything, it's really good idea not to be running around, to have it in a safe place that you're not going crazy around. Okay? And then another thing that's important, especially at school, but also important at home, is that anytime you see something that you feel doesn't look quite right, or you see broken glass, or you see an outlet that looks like it's not working, that you let an adult know. And that's really important for when we're back in school. And if you were to see something, because if you saw water on the floor and nobody reports it, then somebody could trip and they might have glass in their hand, right? Or they might be holding a flame or something, and that could be really, really dangerous. So anytime you see anything that you think could be a problem, you let the teacher know. And you're not tattling, you're trying to help keep everybody safe. So if you look at here in The Simpsons, Lisa notices, whoa, 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 Dad's going crazy and using way too much power, right? That could be a short circuit. And then, of course, Homer Simpson here is just kind of sitting and drinking his coffee and whatever, and he noticed a chemical spill, but this guy walked right into it, right? So pretty extreme examples, but always good to let teachers or parents or adults know if there's something that you feel just isn't right. So reporting all accidents. And usually every year during the first 2 weeks of school, somebody breaks glassware. We use a lot of beakers and stuff like that, and they're made of glass. And a lot of times they break. Usually that's totally fine. You just want to tell a teacher. And the same thing that you should do at home. If you're using any kind of glassware to do your experiment and it breaks, don't sweep it under your bed. Don't shove it in a garbage can. Make sure you tell an adult so that all the little glass pieces get cleaned up and stuff like that. Just because it's the right thing to do, your parent will appreciate that you do that. And it's a safe thing. You never want to forget about it and then step on glass later. Okay? Let's see. Aha. And then electricity. Be super careful with electricity, okay? Never put anything metal in the outlet. So do never stick a fork or anything like that into the outlet. Really dangerous. You can get electric shock that way. Never have all these cords in an outlet. That's really unsafe because it could start a fire. And then make sure that you're always, anytime you're plugging something in, this goes in the bathroom, this works a lot, but it can work in science too, is that you're keeping electricity away from water because those definitely do not mix. So be really careful when you're using electricity, okay? All right, and then this one we're not going to worry about too much until we get back, but you never want to pour just anything down the drain, okay? You always want to ask a parent or an adult, especially if it's not water, ask them if you can pour it down the drain before you do, okay? Because we never know what goes in there, but it's always good to ask. Okay, and then anytime we're working with anybody or we're talking about our lab results, we're respectful, we're thoughtful, we're being kind, and hopefully when we get back in school, you can have lab partners. That's like the best part of science, so much fun. Okay, but being safe is awesome, and it's great, and it really helps keep everyone safe and happy and doing well in science. And whether you're at home or we're back at school, safety is our number one goal. So hope you got those safety instructions okay. Please, now would be a great time to ask any questions if you have them.